Hey guys! Tonight, we drift quietly into feudal Japan, where the air smells of pine resin and old scrolls, and your kimono feels just a little too heavy. You're not a farmer, not a monk, not even a wandering merchant. No, you're something more complicated. You're a samurai. Or at least you used to be. The sword that once hung at your hip like an extension of your soul gone. Taken broken or perhaps surrendered. No clang of steel today, no barked orders. Just silence and the soft crunch of gravel under your straw sandals. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you all tune in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sword is gone. You wake before sunrise in your cramped tatami room, staring at the spot where your katana used to rest. It's not just missing, it's wrong. Like a limb severed clean off while you slept. Your hand twitches for the hilt out of instinct, out of habit, out of identity, and finds only air. Your breath catches. You're not a samurai without it. At least that's what the world thinks, what you think. It was a duel. A foolish one. Or maybe an act of treachery. Historians still argue whether samurai lost their swords mostly through political disgrace, battlefield defeat, or voluntary surrender in acts of penance. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. You're now a man without his soul. Honor lost. Status revoked. No duel to redeem you. No enemy to avenge. Just the crushing realization that the world has moved one rice grain forward and left you behind. You step out into the courtyard. The dew dampens your worn sandals. The sky glows pale orange, promising a day you're not prepared for. You hear a neighbor's wooden pestle pounding mochi, the normalcy of it all almost offensive. A dog barks in the distance. It knows you're not the same, and neither does the town. You walk down the stone-lined path toward the local market. The fishmonger gives you a brief glance. A slow blink. No bow. He used to nearly bow his spine in half. Now you barely get a nod. Even the rice merchant who once offered you the freshest grains in exchange for tales of battle suddenly finds something fascinating in his stack of straw sacks. You could scream, but instead you stand there awkwardly, nodding at no one in particular. Word travels fast in Edo period towns. The fact you're unarmed means only one thing: you've been cast out or cut down in status. Samurai didn't misplace their swords. Losing it meant losing everything: rank, job, income, sometimes even family. A samurai without a sword, like a knight without his armor or his horse, or frankly any cool factor at all. You consider your options. You could try to reclaim your weapon, but that means confronting whoever now holds it. Or worse, admitting defeat and asking for it back. Which is even more humiliating than going without it. So instead, you trudge home, shoulders slouched. The wind picks up, stirring the hem of your robes as if reminding you of every step you're not worthy to take. And then comes the note. Folded, carefully, placed at your door, like a gift, though it stinks of finality. It bears your name in brushstrokes you recognize instantly, your former daimyo's calligraphy. Inside 3 lines. 1, you have brought shame. 2, you are dismissed. 3, return any property not yours, even your teacup. Probably. It hits you in waves. Your retainer stipend gone. Your place in the Lord's court revoked. Even the small plot of land your family used to tend reassigned to some younger, shinier warrior who still has both a sword and a smug grin. Your neighbors avoid your gaze. Children stop practicing sword forms when you walk past. Even the dog won't come near, and so you do the only thing you can. You kneel beside your now empty sword stand. You place your hands on your thighs. You close your eyes, and you begin to recite the words of the Heike Monogatari, that old epic of war and loss, just to remember what it felt like to belong. The sound of the Gion Shoja bells echoes the impermanence of all things. You barely get through the second line before your voice cracks. They say samurai were bound by Bushido, the way of the warrior. But here's a lesser-known truth: that path forks. And when the sword falls away, the warrior must choose disgrace or transformation. Historians still argue whether those who survived swordlessness truly retained their samurai identity, or if they became something entirely different. A ghost. A shell. A warning. You don't know yet which path you're on. But you know one thing. You're not done. And that somehow is worse than being defeated. You stand in front of a lacquered mirror that's seen better days, probably like you. The morning light casts a hard glare on your reflection. You don't recognize the man staring back. His eyes are heavier, his posture softer, like wet bamboo. But it's not just what's missing from your side. It's what's still atop your head. The con mage, that traditional samurai top knot. Once a symbol of your warrior caste, now it's just a punchline waiting to happen. You run a hand over it, feel the greasy stiffness of last week's oil, and you realize it has to go. You've heard the whispers. A samurai without a sword should not wear a warrior's hair. You kneel with a pair of dull scissors borrowed from a cousin who said nothing but handed them over like he was giving you your last rites. Snip. The first lock of hair falls coiling on the floor like a shed identity. Snip. Snip. More falls. You expect to feel lighter, freer. You don't. It just feels wrong, like you're shaving off courage in slow, messy swaths. By the end, your head is patchy, uneven. A monk might call it humble. A mirror calls it you tried. And when you step back outside, freshly de-warriorized, the silence that greets you isn't one of peace. It's one of pity. You shuffle to the public bathhouse. If you're going to look this pathetic, you might as well be clean. The bathhouse owner blinks when he sees your new look. Then he points toward the smaller tubs, not the samurai tier, the ones by the drafty windows. You sit in lukewarm water watching as elderly merchants soak nearby and steal glances your way. One leans in and mutters, "Lost it, didn't you?" You don't answer. He snorts and waggles his eyebrows. Thought so. Happens more these days. Too much peace. No one to fight. He's not wrong. The Tokugawa shogunate has locked the country into a rigid social order and near total stability. Great if you're a farmer. Awful if your profession relies on swordsmanship and honorable violence. With war drying up like yesterday's rice, many samurai find themselves redundant. Or, in your case, discarded. You step out of the bath. Someone's stolen your left sandal. Of course. Later that evening, you try to go to your usual tea house. Not for tea, for dignity. But the server at the door pauses when she sees your hair. "Ah, we're full tonight." You glance past her shoulder. Empty tables. She doesn't even flinch. You nod. Of course. You wander instead toward the edge of town, where the air smells more of compost than cherry blossoms. A group of peasants is huddled around a fire slurping soup and telling jokes. One of them, a teenager, dirt on his cheek like a badge of honor, spots you. "Oh, you look like a half-plucked chicken." You laugh, genuinely, because he's not wrong. In a way, this haircut is a signal fire, a warning and an announcement. I'm not what I was. Some former samurai get around the shame by switching to the monk's path. A few shave their heads clean and retreat to temples where silence is more honorable than disgrace. Historians still debate whether this was an act of devotion or a social escape hatch. Some claim these ex-samurai monks quietly preserved warrior teachings in hidden martial sects. Others believe they just wanted hot porridge and no more duels. You consider the monk path. Robes are easier to clean than armor. Meditation beats assassination. And let's be honest, your sword calluses are useless when even chopsticks tremble in your grip. Still, there's hesitation. The next morning you try one last time to visit your old dojo. Maybe just to watch. Maybe to remember. The gate is shut. A note posted in red ink closed to all but retainers. That stings. You trained there since you were 12. Your sweat is embedded in its floorboards. But you're not retainer enough anymore. Just a ghost in borrowed sandals. You don't knock. You turn and leave. A flock of crows scolds you from a rooftop. One of them drops something from its beak, an old piece of string. Appropriate. The shame of the haircut grows more real as each hour passes. Children laugh behind fans. Elderly men whisper in the corners of the town square. A merchant offers you a job carrying rice sacks for 3 copper coins a day. You almost take it. You almost laugh. Instead, you go home and sit. And stare. And wait. For what you're not sure. Maybe for someone to tell you what to do next. Maybe for the past to knock on your door and apologize. Maybe for your hair to grow back so you can pretend none of this happened. But it did. And now you wear it. On your scalp. Like a confession. You wake up to chanting. Low rhythmic, like the hum of bees meditating. It takes a few moments to realize it's not a dream. The sounds coming from the hills outside town, the temple complex that's always loomed there, half mysterious, half irrelevant. You never paid it much attention before. Samurai don't usually mingle with monks, or they didn't, until now. You've heard the stories, disgraced warriors slipping into temples trading swords for sutras. Some say it's penance, others say it's survival. Historians still argue whether samurai who turned monk did so from guilt or clever social repositioning. Either way, it's a path. And right now, you don't have many of those. You pack light, not that there's much left to pack. A change of clothes, a pouch of coins, and an old comb that belonged to your mother. You leave your empty sword stand behind like a tombstone. No need to carry ghosts up a mountain. The walk is steep. The path zigzags through cedar groves and bamboo thickets, each step a little more exhausting than the last. You're sweating before you even spot the red torii gate that marks the temple entrance. It creaks slightly in the breeze like it's judging you. A monk meets you before you can bow. He's old. His face looks carved out of soft wood. His robes are simple, his gaze sharp. "You're not the first," he says without greeting. Then he turns and walks away. You follow. The temple smells of incense moss and old wood. There's a pond with one very smug frog perched on a lotus leaf. The monks move silently, gliding like shadows in sandals. One sweeps the stone path with such focused elegance, it's borderline martial arts. You wonder if he used to be someone like you. You're given robes, brown and rough, like potato sacks, stitched with shame. They itch. You're assigned a room the size of a horse stall, with a thin mat and a tiny window that shows exactly one rock. The monk returns with a bowl of rice porridge. No seasoning, no garnish. It looks like a beige apology. He sets it down, then sits across from you. "You still crave the sword," he says. You nod. He chuckles softly. "That will pass. Or it won't. Either way, the rice stays the same. You eat, slowly, carefully. The texture is like warm paper, and yet somehow it's the most grounding thing you've had in weeks. The days begin to blur. Wake before the sun. Meditate until your knees mutiny. Sweep gravel paths into patterns that the wind ruins 10 minutes later. Copy sutras by hand until your fingers cramp. Then eat. Then chant. Then sleep. Repeat. At first you hate it. You hate the silence. You hate the repetition. You hate the way your thoughts sneak up on you now that there's no clang of steel to drown them out. But slowly, like moss on stone, you adapt. Your feet learn to tread softly. Your hands learn to fold robes with precision. Your thoughts slow down, take turns, and occasionally, just occasionally, make peace with each other. One morning while sweeping the meditation garden, you hear laughter. Not your own. A novice monk has slipped and fallen face first into a koi pond. You laugh before you can stop yourself. It bursts out sudden and loud. Heads turn. But instead of disapproval, you see amusement. Even the old monk grins like the universe just cracked a joke and let you in on it. You start to notice things. The way light filters through the maple trees. The way tea tastes when you sip instead of slurp. The tiny rhythmic squeak of sandals on polished wood. And then, one evening during meditation, it happens. You feel something. Not enlightenment. Let's not get dramatic. But stillness. Actual quiet, full-bodied stillness. Like your mind took a breath and forgot to exhale. For a moment, you aren't a disgraced warrior. You aren't a former anything. You're just here. Breathing. Being. It passes, of course. But the echo lingers. You begin to understand what the monks are really doing. They're not avoiding life, they're facing it without flinching. No armor. No weapons, just breath and time and an absurd number of chores. Some of the monks used to be samurai too. You can tell by the way they move, the way they look at you without pity, the way their robes hang like they've worn heavier things. You ask one of them, an older man with a nose like a hawk's beak, if he misses the sword. Every day he says, "But I miss who I thought I was more." That night you dream of your sword, not in your hand, but buried. Under cherry blossoms. Waiting. You wake to the sound of sweeping again. Same gravel path. Same crisp dawn air. But something's different today. The old monk gestures for you to follow him, and you do down a narrow corridor past the bell tower and into the storehouse behind the main hall. It smells like dust and dry pine. In the corner sit a stack of wooden buckets, a bundle of brooms, and one very sad broom, with half its bristles missing. That one's yours apparently. You're on maintenance, he says, and leaves. Maintenance sounds noble, like restoring relics or preserving history. But what it means here is fixing doors that won't close, hauling firewood, and scrubbing floors so stubborn with soot they seem actively offended by your efforts. And sweeping. Always sweeping. You start to wonder if the monks are secretly training for a dust-based martial art. Your hands blister. Your knees ache. You develop a cough that might be spiritual or just mold. At night, you fall into your mat like a felled tree, your robes stiff with sweat and ash. The only upside. No one looks at you with shame here. Just exhaustion. And perhaps mild amusement when your broom gets stuck in a rain gutter. One afternoon, while trying to patch a hole in the garden wall, a small boy wanders in. He watches you work for a while, arms folded like a skeptical daimyo. "Were you a samurai?" he finally asks. You hesitate. The answer feels too complicated. "I used to carry a sword," you say. He nods. "Did you ever kill someone?" You pause again. The kind of pause that's not about memory, but about measurement. "That's not the important part," you reply. He kicks a pebble. "My uncle's a samurai. He says monks are cowards." You smile faintly. Then your uncle's never scrubbed an outhouse with one bucket of water and a bad attitude. That earns you a chuckle. The boy leaves, but the conversation stays. Later during evening chanting, you picture him repeating what you said to his uncle. You're not sure whether to laugh or worry. Historians still argue whether the monk path was a noble retreat or just social exile dressed in spiritual garb. Some claim monastic life gave former samurai the discipline they already excelled at, a structure to channel all that leftover war energy. Others argue it was glorified punishment, years of peeling potatoes, in the hopes that someone might forget your shame. But there's a strange comfort in the routine. You begin to anticipate the rhythm of the gong. You measure your day in footsteps and spoonfuls. You learn to breathe between tasks, not just through them. You even take pride in your menial mastery. You can now clean a rice pot with 3 pebbles and a whisper. You once balanced a water bucket on your shoulder while fending off a curious monkey. You admit to yourself, the best floor polisher in this quadrant of Japan. Still, the sword-shaped absence in your soul doesn't go away. Sometimes during quiet hours, you sneak into the back garden and practice empty-hand kata. Your movements are stiff at first, more ceremonial than useful, but your body remembers. Muscle-like memory doesn't ask permission. You shift through forms in slow, fluid arcs. A monk spots you one morning, mid-strike, and simply nods. No judgment, no question, just acknowledgement. Another day, you're assigned to help cook the midday meal. You chop vegetables with such precision that the kitchen monk raises an eyebrow. You know he says you'd make a decent chef. You laugh. "Only if we start serving sliced invaders." He laughs too. Everyone needs a specialty. Then he hands you a bowl of pickled radish and tells you to serve the hall. You enter the eating room, head bowed, tray steady. You serve each monk in silence like a shadow with snacks. Then you get to the old monk, the one who brought you here. He looks up at you, eyes crinkling. "How does it feel?" he asks. "To serve, to stay." You think about it. "I miss the sword," you say. He nods. "You always will, but now you serve something else. You don't know what that means. Yet. But it lingers." Later that night, as you scrub soot from a lantern's glass, you catch your own reflection. Still the same face. Still the awkward haircut, now growing back in weird, rebellious patches. But your eyes look different. Calmer, sharper in their softness. You realize you haven't thought about revenge in days, not even once. Instead, your mind wanders to firewood arrangements and which monk is likely stealing extra pickles. You go to bed sore, but not broken. Tomorrow, there will be more sweeping, more rice, more silence, and maybe, just maybe, a little peace. You leave the temple on a gray morning, not because you've finished some journey, but because the abbot tells you it's time. No ceremony, no grand farewell, just a folded note slipped under your mat. The body is quiet. The mind is ready. Go. And so, you go. The monks give you food for 3 days, a walking stick and a small pouch of coins. One gives you a silent bow. Another hands you a dry sandalwood bead and says, "For when your thoughts get loud again." You pocket it like a talisman, though you have no idea how it's supposed to work. You suspect it doesn't. That's probably the point. You head east toward the coast, following trails that twist between rice paddies and shrines half swallowed by vines. Villagers watch you pass, trying to guess which kind of wanderer you are, merchant pilgrim Ronin. A few ask outright. You used to be a samurai, you say. They nod, like that explains everything and nothing. At night, you sleep in shrines under eaves or beside slow-moving streams. You dream less now. Or maybe the dreams just bother you less. On the fifth night, you reach a roadside tavern. Not much more than a shack with paper walls and smoke-stained beams. The sign swings crooked above the door, Fortunate Carp. You're not sure if it's a joke or a warning. Inside, it's warm and loud. Farmers, fishermen, and one clearly drunk horse trader share cheap sake and cheaper stories. You keep to the corner sipping broth and pretending not to listen. Then someone recognizes you. Not by name. Not by face. But by posture. You've carried a sword? A man says from across the room. He's thick-necked scar on his jaw like a lightning bolt. Even without one, I can tell. You nod because there's no point denying it. He grins. You ever fight bare-handed? You blink. Sometimes, wanna make some coin. He points to a door behind the bar. They do matches here. Quiet ones, few rules. You've heard of these places. Underground fight circuits, half desperation, half entertainment. Disgraced warriors broke farmers, angry fishermen, all punching for pocket change and something to feel. Historians still debate how widespread these underground samurai fights were, but most agree they happened, and that they were brutal. Unregulated, blood-soaked echoes of what used to be called honor. You should decline. Instead, you finish your broth, stretch your sore arms, and walk through the door. The fight room is dim, all lantern glow and sweat stink. Two men are already circling each other on a straw mat. Fists raised breath-ragged. One swings. The other ducks and counters with a shoulder to the ribs. A gasp ripples through the crowd. Coins change hands faster than punches land. When it's your turn, there's no announcement, just a gesture and a nod. You step onto the mat. Your opponent is taller, younger, and wearing half a shirt and a whole smirk. You bow. He doesn't. The first hit surprises even him. A palm strike to the collarbone, angled just so. He stumbles. The crowd cheers. He rushes you, all flailing arms and ego. You duck, pivot, sweep his legs with the grace of someone who once trained daily in structured violence. He crashes down like a dropped scarecrow. You win. There's no trophy. Just a small handful of coins and a pat on the back that somehow stings more than the fight. You don't sleep that night. Not because of the bruises, but because something old stirred during that fight. Something you thought was buried beneath temple gravel and monk chants. The next night, you fight again. And again. Each time you win. Sometimes fast, sometimes ugly, but always with that edge in your gut, the one that whispers, this is what you were made for. The tavern owner starts reserving the good futon for you. The other fighters stop making eye contact. One offers you a drink and calls you Kensei Sword Saint. Ironic given your lack of sword. You laugh, but not loudly. After your sixth fight, a man approaches you. Clean robes, thin mustache, eyes like a ledger. You're talented, he says. Have you considered private work? You shrug. Not assassination. He adds quickly. Retrieval, protection, escort jobs, well paid. You don't answer. He hands you a folded note and walks away. Back in your room, you read it. A name, a town, an amount of money that could buy 50 pickled radishes and one new start. You stare at it a long time. You don't miss the sword exactly. You miss purpose. And that feels dangerously similar. You take the job. Not because you're desperate, though the soles of your sandals are practically whispering for help. Not even because of the coin, though your last rice ball came with a side of pebble. You take it because you want to know who you are when someone hands you a task, and you have to say yes or no without the comfort of a title to hide behind. The town is 2 days away, nestled beside a river that coils like a sleeping eel. The journey is quiet, peaceful even. You pass farmers tending early wheat, their hands black with soil and routine. One nods to you. You nod back. Nobody asks questions. It's nice. When you arrive, you're greeted not by your employer, but by a servant with an underwhelming bow and an overwhelming list of rules. Rule 1. Don't speak to the client directly unless spoken to. Rule 2. Don't mention swords. Rule 3. Don't leave the estate grounds after sunset. You nod. Internally, you roll your eyes. The house itself is modest by daimyo standards but still smells like inherited money and polished wood. You're shown to a room with a decent futon and a pot of green tea that tastes like apology. At sunset, the job begins. You're to escort the client's nephew, an 11-year-old boy with a mouthful of questions and absolutely no respect for personal space, from his studies to his bedroom, and then stand guard in the hallway until morning. You expect trouble, bandits, spies, assassins lurking in the garden. What you get instead is 3 hours of the boy asking if you've ever stabbed someone in the neck. You say no. Have you punched someone so hard they puked? Also no. Did you ever ride a tiger into battle? You pause. No. He sighs, dramatically disappointed. You samurai are all stories and no action. You almost laugh. Almost. This continues for days. Each night you guard the hallway, while the boy snores like a miniature ox. You take your role seriously, even if no one else seemed to. Then on the 5th night, you hear it. A shuffle. Soft like silk, dragging over tile. You slip silently from your post and follow the sound through the narrow garden path. Moonlight paints the stones pale blue. A shadow moves near the koi pond. You pounce. Except it's not a spy. It's the boy. He stares up at you, not afraid, just mildly annoyed. I was hungry, he mutters. You're jumpy. You exhale, trying not to laugh or scream. You're not supposed to be out here. Neither are you. Touché. You walk him back to his room. He asks if you'll teach him how to walk that quietly. You hesitate. But then why not first lesson you say stop talking? His smile is wide enough to warm your calloused heart. Over the next few days you train him. Quietly, subtly. Simple stances. Breathing techniques. Balance exercises disguised as games. He calls it ninja time. You don't correct him. You also teach him focus. Not as a lecture, but by example. How to tie his sash correctly. How to set a tea tray without clatter. How to sit still for more than 12 seconds. One afternoon, the uncle, the client, observes from the veranda. He says nothing, but later that evening, your pay is increased. No comment. Just more coins in your pouch. You suspect it's his version of gratitude. Or relief. Historians still discuss the phenomenon of samurai becoming tutors, guards, and house instructors after losing their formal positions. Some consider it a degradation. Others a noble repurposing of skill. The truth, like most things in history, sits in the muddled middle. Survival often wears different uniforms. You begin to feel something like satisfaction. Not pride exactly, but usefulness. And in the absence of glory, usefulness is surprisingly nourishing. The boy improves. He can now walk across a wooden floor without a single creak. He once snuck up behind the cook and caused a minor soup disaster. You try not to encourage him. You fail. One evening he asks, "Why don't you carry a sword?" You don't answer right away. "Did you lose it?" You nod. "That's close enough." "Will you ever get it back?" You look at him. "Really look." "Maybe. But I don't think I need it anymore." He seems confused, then satisfied, then hungry. You fetch him a rice ball and watch him devour it like a tiny demon. That night, he falls asleep, clutching a wooden training sword. You stand guard as always, but this time, you're smiling. You leave the estate before dawn. Not fired, not dismissed, just finished. The boy's training is complete, at least the kind that someone like you can offer. His uncle gives you a curt nod and a pouch heavier than expected. No thanks, no ceremony. Just business concluded, like closing a scroll. You walk back toward the coast with the sun behind you, casting a long, thin shadow that seems to follow reluctantly. It feels good to move again, to walk with no boy clinging to your sleeve, no soup-stained kimono to scrub, no garden to patrol. But that absence soon sharpens into something else, a dull edge of loneliness. You arrive in a larger town this time, bustling. Noise carts, vendors yelling about fish. It's as if the world kept spinning while you were babysitting a miniature warlord. You miss the stillness of the temple for a second. Then you nearly step in horse droppings and get shoved by a noodle vendor's apprentice. Balance right. A man at a street corner waves you over. Thin lips, crooked teeth, silk sleeves trying too hard. You peg him immediately. Recruiter. The kind who smells which way the wind is shifting and profits accordingly. I hear you've worked private contracts, he says. You shrug. I represent interests that prefer discretion. A phrase that always leads to legal gray areas. He produces a scroll sealed in red wax. You break it open. It's a request, not a duel, not a bounty, a delivery. You want me to carry a letter. Not just any letter, he says, smiling like a snake trying flattery. This one needs to disappear into the right hands quietly. The pay is good. The route is known to be less than peaceful. You accept. The package is small, wrapped in cloth, smelling faintly of sandalwood. You tuck it inside your robe close to your heart. Funny. Once you carried blades there. Now it's secrets. The road north is long and winding, peppered with bandit rumors and way stations where the tea is thick as glue. You travel alone, quiet eyes, always scanning the trees for rustling that doesn't belong. On the third day, something does move. A man steps onto the path. Sword visible. Two more figures emerge from the woods. Classic setup. You sigh. Your hand moves instinctively and meets only cloth. Right. No sword, but you do have your staff. It's just a walking stick. Or was. You grip it like a Bakken and take a stance that makes the lead bandit pause. He smirks. You gonna whack me with a stick, monk? You don't answer. Because you already have. One clean strike to the knee sends him staggering. Another to the ribs. The second attacker is faster, but sloppy. You pivot, drop your weight, and use his own momentum to toss him into a patch of nettles. The third reconsiders and bolts into the woods. Good choice. You breathe heavily. Not out of fear. Out of exertion. You're not 20 anymore, and you don't bounce like you used to. But you're alive, and the package is safe. You make it to the drop point, a tea shop by a cliffside shrine, without further trouble. The recipient is a noble woman dressed like a servant, her eyes sharp behind plain hair. She accepts the letter without a word, leaves an envelope of coins behind. Then she vanishes into the trees. You sit on the shrine steps for a long time afterward, watching the ocean gulp down the sky. The air smells of salt and smoke. A seagull screams something profane in bird language. You eat a rice cake so stale, it could injure someone. Historians still debate the extent to which former samurai took on courier or espionage roles during peacetime. Some scrolls suggest an entire subculture of silent runners, swordless, nameless, paid to vanish and deliver. Others argue it was mostly rumor romanticized by storytellers hungry for forgotten heroes. You don't care which side is right, because you've done it and survived. That night, you stay at a roadside inn. The host doesn't ask questions, just hands you a room key and a bowl of broth that doesn't taste like disappointment. You sleep with the staff beside your futon, more comfort than weapon. You dream of riding a tiger into battle. When you wake, you laugh out loud. Maybe you'll tell the boy it was true next time you see him. The next few weeks slide by like watered-down rice paper, quiet, inevitable, and slightly uneven. You follow the roads west, away from the coast toward the smaller provinces where people know less about who you used to be. The towns shrink. The silence grows, and with it, a strange kind of calm seeps into your bones. There are no more jobs waiting for you, no messages to carry, no children to train. Just air and road and the occasional meal bought with coins that clink like fragile promises. Then one morning you pass through a village that smells entirely of onions and regret, and you see it a wooden sign hammered into the ground just beyond the main well. Actors wanted. No. Experience necessary. Must not be afraid of swords. Chickens are booing. You blink. You reread. You laugh. A child runs past you with a prop spear made of bamboo and string. A second later, a man in kabuki paint chases after him shouting, "That's not your role," before tripping over a bucket and falling in a spectacularly ungraceful heap. You found your next job. They call themselves the Heavenly Moon Players. A traveling kabuki troupe. Part drama, part farce, all chaos. Their lead performer is a one-eyed woman named Tomoe, who can drink anyone under the table and still hit her monologue on cue. Their playwright insists he once served a daimyo, but the only thing noble about him is his constant sneezing at cheap incense. Tomoe sizes you up. You don't talk much. You shrug. Good. That'll make your death scenes more believable. And just like that, you're cast. Your first role, a wandering Ronin who dies in the first act. Ironic. Also easy 2 lines and a dramatic collapse into a haystack. You pull it off flawlessly, mostly because you trip on your own sandal and actually fall headfirst into the hay. The audience, 3 farmers, a dog, and a man you're pretty sure is asleep, erupts in applause. You're promoted to second act antagonist by nightfall. And so begins your career as a stage fighter. You learn to stage sword fights with wooden blades painted to look like steel. Your old muscle memory kicks in, but now it's for show. Your strikes are wide. Your falls, theatrical. You develop a flair for dying with style, tumbling, gasping. Sometimes throwing in a haiku mid-collapse just for fun. Steel kisses my throat. The moon rises without me. Cue thunder. Exit. Tomo makes you rewrite that one. Too dramatic, she says, dressed in full ghost costume and applying powder with a chicken feather. You travel from village to village, your performances paid in coins, vegetables, and the occasional handmade kimono. Your stage name becomes Takeshi the Silent Blade, which is confusing because you're usually the one who dies loudest. One evening during a particularly rowdy show, you get hit in the face with a cabbage. You pause, catch it, bow deeply. The crowd goes wild. After the show, a farmer approaches you. He's old, wears a hat made from a broken basket. You used to be a real one, didn't you? He asks. A real what, samurai? You don't answer. He smiles. I could tell. You flinched at the fake sword, but not at the real fire. He's right. During the second act, part of the stage curtain caught fire from a wayward lantern. You stomped it out without missing your cue. Nobody noticed. You miss it? He asks. Not really. That's a lie. You miss parts of it. The discipline, the precision, the knowing who you are when you wake up. But not the blood, not the weight. Still acting gives you something war never did: laughter. Sometimes at your expense, sometimes at the playwright's, once at a chicken that wandered on stage and refused to leave. The audience threw rice. You bowed anyway. Historians rarely mention the number of ex-samurai who turned to the stage. But scrolls suggest many kabuki troupes were filled with fallen warriors using their muscle memory and dramatic flair to earn coin and cling to purpose. It wasn't just theater. It was therapy. One rainy afternoon, you practice a fight scene with Tomo. She parries lazily, then grins. You're too good at this, she says. You smirk. Maybe I used to be someone. You still are. The words hit harder than expected. That night, you dream of your old sword again. Only this time, it's on stage. And you're giving it away to a child in the front row who immediately uses it to hit a turnip. You wake up laughing. And for once, you don't feel the usual weight in your chest, just a sense of rhythm. And maybe, just maybe, a bit of joy. You wake up to the sound of goat bells. Again. Because in this village, this endlessly enthusiastic, eternally dusty, cabbage-scented village goats are audience members, and critics, and sometimes actors. The smallest one, nicknamed Kenta, has already wandered onto the stage 3 times this week and ruined one dramatic death monologue by chewing on the hem of your kimono mid-swoon. But today you're not performing. You're resting. Sort of. You sit on a crate behind the stage, rubbing your ankle after an overzealous pratfall the night before. Your wooden sword lies beside you, chipped and splintered like it's seen real battle, which it hasn't unless you count the time you used it to fend off a noodle-thieving crow. Tomo flops down next to you, a half-peeled mandarin in one hand and a scroll of new dialogue in the other. Got an offer, she says, mouth half full. Fancy noble house in the next province. Wants us to perform for their daughter's name day. You raise an eyebrow. Nobles rarely request traveling kabuki troupes too unpredictable, too loud, too goat adjacent. They're paying, she adds, in silver. You nod. It's settled. The next morning you travel north with the troupe. 10 people. 3 goats. A stage cart that creaks like a haunted gate, and a playwright who insists on narrating every bend in the road as if your lives are part of a grand epic. You arrive at the estate 3 days later. High walls. Shiny gates. A courtyard so clean it reflects the sky like a pond. Servants greet you with polite disdain and promptly begin listing things you're not allowed to do. No improvisation, no jokes about monkeys, No goats on stage. Kenta bleats in protest. You're led to a covered stage in a garden lined with peonies and judgment. A few noble guests mill about sipping tea and whispering behind fans. The girl being celebrated watches you with a boredom so intense it might qualify as a spiritual discipline. You're playing a war general this time. It's a bigger role. More lines. Less dying. You feel a flutter of something unfamiliar stage fright. Or maybe it's the tiny bit of pride leaking back into your soul like a stubborn weed. The performance begins. You move through the motions, boo, enter, draw your fake sword. Your voice is calm, deliberate, trained through repetition. Your posture is sharp enough to cut rice paper. You strike, you parry. You recite lines once meant for men who died on real battlefields. And then something odd happens. The girl smiles. Not a big one, just a corner. But it's there. And you realize something. You're not pretending to be a warrior anymore. You are one, just on a different battlefield. Historians still debate the cultural role kabuki played in preserving the honor-based ideals of the samurai class. Some say it mocked them. Others claim it enshrined them, allowing commoners and fallen nobles alike to reenact fading values in a world growing more peaceful and bureaucratic. Either way, when the curtain falls and polite applause drifts through the air like a tired breeze, you feel something unexpected. Fulfillment. After the performance, the noble host approaches you directly. A stiff bow. A compliment too formal to sound sincere. Then he pauses. Were you trained formally? You meet his gaze. Once. He nods. Says nothing more. That evening, your troop is treated to an actual meal, not just soup and onions, but roasted fish, fresh rice, and sake that doesn't taste like paint thinner. Spirits are high. Even the goats are fed early. Tomo raises her cup. To the general. They cheer. You smile. Maybe even blush. Later, you sit beneath a cherry tree, the petals falling like slow rain around you. Your wooden sword rests beside you, and, for once, you don't feel ashamed of it. You run a thumb along its edge and realize you don't miss the real one as much anymore. The weight. The blood. The finality. This version doesn't kill. But it still means something. It still speaks. And it's not done yet. You leave the troop just before the plum blossoms bloom. Not because you're ungrateful. Not because of scandal or drama or goat-related injury. You leave because the road tugs at you again, quiet and patient like a string tied loosely to your ankle. That gentle, persistent call that says, not here. Not yet. Keep going. Tomo doesn't try to stop you. She just hands you a pair of rice balls, a half-full canteen, and a smirk. You're terrible at dying on stage anyway, she says. You trained me. Exactly. The playwright sobs into a scroll. The goats chew grass and offer no opinion. You head inland. The path is less worn now. Fewer villages. More wind. One morning, your shadow stretches long across an empty road and you realize you haven't spoken out loud in 2 days. It doesn't bother you. Then, near a town so small, it doesn't bother with a sign a messenger spots you from across the square. You there. He calls. You look like a man who's held a blade. You sigh. Here we go again. The job is simple. A merchant with money and a child with too much free time. The merchant wants someone to teach the basics of swordplay enough to impress visitors, not enough to start wars. You agree. The pay is generous. The house has a decent view of the hills. And the child named Koji is at least more attentive than your last student. But not by much. Koji is 10. Has the discipline of a bored squirrel and the attention span of a puff of smoke. The first time you demonstrate a basic stance, he tries to copy it and falls dramatically into a nearby shrub. I've been wounded, he yells. Send rice balls. You rub your temples and remember the days when you were feared. Still, you teach him. One stance at a time. One breath at a time. You show him how to bow. How to hold a bokken without turning it into a dangerous baton. How to focus. You fail. He focuses mostly on beetles. You adjust your methods. Each lesson ends with a story, some real, some exaggerated to the point of myth. He listens more closely when you mention battle's secret caves and samurai who used fans instead of swords. Historians still argue whether samurai were ever expected to teach fencing to merchant children. In theory, caste laws prohibited it. In practice, money and favors blurred those lines more than ink in a thunderstorm. Some scrolls even suggest retired warriors made a living, training sons of the rising merchant class, who didn't care about Bushido only looking impressive at tea parties. One afternoon, Koji surprises you. You enter the courtyard expecting another mock ambush involving garden tools. Instead, he's already there, standing still, focused, practicing a kata you showed him 2 days ago. His stance isn't perfect, but it's not terrible. He sees you and grins. Did I do it right? You nod. Better. Did you teach anyone really famous? You think back. Faces blur. Names fade. Not famous, but important. To you. You pause. Yes. He smiles and returns to his practice. That evening, his mother presents you with a lacquered box. Inside a small purse, of coins, a bundle of dried fish, and a carefully wrapped scroll. Koji wrote it, she says, bowing. He says, "You're the best swordless swordsman in Japan." You nearly laugh, but it catches in your throat. You leave the next day. Koji waves until you're out of sight. You don't look back, mostly because you don't trust yourself not to stay. You walk until the house is thin out again, until the birds forget your name. You begin to wonder if this is who you are. Now a man who passes through towns like wind through tall grass. Teaching skills nobody really needs, but everyone still wants. You find another job. Then another. You train 2 more boys. One girl and a man who claims to be training for a duel, but is clearly just trying to impress his mistress. Each one bows when you arrive. Each one forgets you after a month. You don't mind. Some part of you is just glad to be useful. Still moving. Still remembered if only briefly. Each night you practice alone, quietly, in borrowed gardens or in courtyards. Your movements slow, purposeful, almost meditative. You're no longer preparing for war. You're preserving the rhythm. And somehow that's enough. You're sitting in a tea house when the man with the hat sits down. You didn't invite him. He doesn't order anything. He just lowers himself onto the cushion across from you like he's done it before in 100 other lifetimes. His wide-brimmed kasa hat hides most of his face, but you catch a glint of something steel trouble. Maybe both. You don't look like a samurai, he says without preamble. You don't look like someone with manners. He grins. You stare at each other for a few moments over cups of lukewarm barley tea. Then, he leans forward. There's work, he says. You say nothing. Not noble. Not official. Not clean. Still nothing. Well paid? Ah, it always comes down to that, doesn't it? You let the silence hang just long enough to feel superior, then nod. He places a slip of paper on the table. A name. A village. A description that sounds like an errand and feels like a test. You go. Not because you need the coin, but because this particular kind of vagueness always means something more interesting than delivering miso. The village is small, suspicious, the kind of place where windows shut themselves and chickens glare like guards. You find the house with the red paper on the door and knock twice. The man who opens it looks like a boiled root in human form, wrinkled, wary, and halfway into the afterlife. He eyes you the way one might eye a stray dog with decent posture. You're here for the item. You nod. He hands you a small, wrapped bundle. Deliver it to the shrine west of the river. Alone. You glance down at the package. Too light for gold, too square for cloth, too simple for anything good. Still you take it. The path to the shrine winds through tall grass and low fog. You feel watched. You often feel watched these days. The difference is, today, it's true. Halfway there, a voice calls out, "Drop it." You don't. 3 figures step from the trees. None wear armor, but all carry blades. And none of them have the posture of hired peasants. This isn't a robbery. It's an interception. You sigh. Do you even know what's in it? One of them asks. You shake your head. Then why protect it? You pause. Because that's the question, isn't it? Why carry secrets for strangers? Why take jobs from men with concealed eyes and too many vague promises? Why still act like a samurai when nobody's asking you to? You don't have an answer, but your feet shift into stance. The fight is fast, brutal, not elegant. You've traded polish for instinct, posture for grit. You use your staff again, one broken at the end and wrapped in cloth. It spins, strikes, sweeps legs and ribs with equal indifference. You don't win so much as survive louder. When the last attacker stumbles off clutching his shoulder, you stand there heaving. Bloody, sore, alive. You look at the bundle. It's torn. You peel back the wrapping. Inside a lacquered box. Inside the box, a letter. Sealed. Old. The ink has bled into the fibers, but the crest is clear. A family emblem you recognize. You fought under it once. Long ago. The shrine is closer now. You deliver the box anyway, hands shaking more from memory than pain. The monk accepts it with a solemn bow and nothing more. You stay the night at the shrine. He gives you tea, bandages, silence. You served once, he says. You nod. He gestures at the stars. So did they. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to. Historians still argue whether Ronin took on courier work as a form of atonement or just survival. Some believe they carried messages meant to close old wounds between clans or conceal dishonor too delicate to commit to history. Whatever that letter contained, it wasn't meant for you. But you carried it anyway. Because some habits don't break. Even when the sword is gone. Even when the wars are over. The monk lets you sleep on the veranda. The wind is cool. The night is full of crickets. You dream of a sword again. But this time it's resting. Not buried. Not wielded. Just there. Like a memory you no longer need to carry everywhere you go. The job after that one is simpler. Less poetry, fewer ambushes, and absolutely no sealed letters with blood-stained crests. You're hired to stand outside a tea house and look dangerous. That's it. The client is a silk merchant who swears someone wants him dead. In truth, he's just irritating. And half the town would pay good money for him to get lost in a pond. But money is money. And your body, sore as it is, still knows how to stand tall. Feet slightly apart, eyes scanning for threats you secretly hope won't appear. It's strange work. Passive. You're not guarding gold or secrets, just a man's ego wrapped in silk and overcooked fears. He paces inside the tea house all day slurping expensive tea and sending out servants to whisper, make sure he's still there. You are. You always are. Each evening he hands you a coin with trembling fingers, as if you've just slain a demon rather than stood still for 7 hours trying not to sneeze. By the end of the first week, he trusts you enough to talk. They laughed at me, he mutters over his third cup of tea. Said I didn't need protection. You say nothing. But you know he says, tapping his chest, you feel it too, don't you? The threat, just hovering. You nod. Because you do. Not bandits. Not assassins. Something older. That crawling sense of obsolescence. Of being a relic in a world that has no use for you, but still expects you to stand there polished and alert like a ceremonial statue. Some call it honor. Some call it habit. You call it Tuesday. One afternoon, a group of younger samurai walk past the tea house. Not Ronin. Real retainers. Clad in fresh-crested armor, swords sharp and untouched. They glance at you and smirk. One leans in and says, that swordless man is a guard, must be a monk. Or a statue. They laugh. You say nothing. You could have responded. Could have challenged them. Could have reminded them that a man without a sword isn't harmless, just unfinished. But instead, you blink slowly and resume your watch. Later that day, the merchant comes out with a dumpling wrapped in wax paper. For you, he says. It's warm. That night, as you lie on the hard futon in the servants' quarters behind the tea house, you feel something strange. Contentment. Not pride. Not joy. Just the absence of bitterness. Historians rarely write about the former warriors who found their next purpose in stillness. Most stories prefer the dramatic fall from grace or the bloody last stand. But there were those who simply stood still, who guarded people who didn't deserve them, who made themselves useful without noise, and in the quiet, they remained samurai. You keep the job for another week. Then one day the merchant doesn't show up. His servant delivers your payment and a letter with stiff brushstrokes. Thank you. I sleep now without fear. That's it. No signature. No fanfare. Just peace. You leave town that afternoon. No destination. Just a direction. West this time. The road curves gently through fields of golden rice bowed under the weight of early autumn. A breeze carries the scent of sweet sake and distant cooking fires. The hills ahead are low and familiar, like shoulders waiting for a head to rest. You walk slowly now. Not because of pain, though your knees creak like temple doors, but because you've realized you don't need to rush. Not anymore. Not for anyone. You arrive in the town of Hoshimura just as the sun sets, casting long shadows that stretch like arms across the dusty road. It's quiet here. Not temple quiet, not wilderness quiet. Just slow, like time forgot to check in. A sign catches your eye, daughters for marriage. Dowries negotiable. Beneath it, also potatoes 2 for 1. You pause. Consider the potatoes. Move on. The local inn is modest but clean. The innkeeper is a wiry woman who greets you with the resigned politeness of someone who has seen too many guests and too few good tips. She hands you a key and jerks her head toward a side room. You hear for the merchant's girl, she asks. You blink. What girl, she snorts. You'll find out. You do. At breakfast, the merchant himself arrives. Wide smile, red cheeks, smells like plum wine and desperation. You're the swordless one, yes, he says, plopping down beside you. You don't answer. He continues anyway. I've got a daughter. Good girl, strong, not too picky. You look experienced. You raise an eyebrow. He takes that as encouragement. She needs a husband. Someone who doesn't scare the chickens but can scare the neighbors, if you know what I mean. You do. Unfortunately, she's 20. Likes pickles. Hates moths. Can lift a sack of rice with one arm. Sounds formidable. She is. And she's tired of waiting for some flashy young fool to come along with a fancy crest and no brains. You chew your rice. Slowly. Carefully. I'm not looking for marriage. Not even for land he wheedles. I'll throw in a field. Good soil. South-facing. You remember the last time someone offered you land. It came with taxes, nosy neighbors, and a local drunk who thought you were his reincarnated uncle. No, you say. He frowns. Well, at least think about it. She's very quiet. You smirk. That's what people used to say about swords, too. He doesn't get it. Later, you meet the daughter by accident. She's in the town square loading bags of millet into a cart. She glances at you, wipes sweat from her brow, and says, Don't worry. I'm not interested either. You blink, then chuckle. Your father's persistent. He's terrified I'll end up a shrine maiden, or worse, happy and unmarried. You help her load the cart, not because you're obligated, just because the bags are heavy and you haven't lifted anything heavier than a teapot in weeks. She asks about your past. You offer vague answers. She doesn't pry. You look like a man who left something behind. She says not unkindly, Don't we all? She nods. I left a music teacher. He smelled like glue and had too many opinions about flutes. You laugh. A real one. That evening, the merchant invites you to dinner. Again. You decline. Again. You two looked cozy? He says, narrowing his eyes. We carried millet, you reply. It's not a courtship ritual. He mumbles something about wasted chances and storms off. That night, you sit on the inn's porch watching stars poke through the indigo sky like timid fireflies. The air smells of earth and distant miso. You sip tea and think about how many people want to trade daughters for peace of mind. You think about how strange it is that marriage has become a tactical solution for some and a prison sentence for others. Historians still debate the role marriage played in the lives of former samurai. Some used it as a means of re-entry into polite society, marrying into merchant families for security. Others refused, entirely clinging to solitude as the last thread of their former life. Scrolls from the Dejanido period mention ronin, who lived out their days alone, never settling, always drifting, like forgotten poems. You don't know which one you are yet. The girl Mio, you later learn, doesn't press the issue. But she does share a rice ball with you on your last day in town. For the road, she says, it'll crumble before sunset. I packed 2. You thank her. As you walk away from Hoshimura, you think about what it would have been like to stay. To live on south-facing soil. To tend millet. To argue over moths and pickles. But you also know something else. You're still not done moving. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The next village doesn't have a name on any map, just a crooked sign at the crossroads carved with the kanji for rice and mud. It's honest, at least. You arrive hungry, dusty, and trailed by a crow who seems convinced you owe it something. You trade one of Mio's rice bowls for a bowl of barley soup and a rumor. They're hiring strong backs out. By the patties, the innkeeper says, nodding toward the hills. Harvest's late, and half the boys ran off to go play soldier. You raise an eyebrow. Play, he shrugs. A local lord's recruiting. Big words, tiny wages. They'll be back once the glamour wears off. You spend the night in the barn sharing space with a sheep who snores and a rooster with a grudge. The rooster wins every argument by pecking your sandal at sunrise. By noon, you're ankle deep in mud. It's not elegant work. You know that. You've gone from stage fighting to actual fighting, to fencing tutor, to glorified scarecrow. And now this, pulling rice stalks in rhythmic tugs shoulder to shoulder with peasants who neither recognize you nor care. And that somehow is refreshing. Nobody asks if you used to carry a sword. Nobody wonders what shame drove you into the fields. They just hand you a woven hat, grunt, a greeting, and show you where to start pulling. You fall into the rhythm. Step, grip, pull, stack, repeat. Your hands blister again. New spots now. Your back protests like an old general forced into dance lessons. But your mind, curiously, is quiet. That night you eat simple food with the other workers. Pickled daikon barley tea rice with sesame. Someone plays a flute badly. Someone else sings worse. You laugh with them, not above them. With. A boy asks what your trade is. You say used to be samurai. He shrugs. We all used to be something. You like him immediately. The next few days pass in a blur of mud and mosquitoes. You learn the names of tools you've never touched before, how to recognize a bad rice stalk from a good one, and how to flick leeches off your calves like a local. One afternoon, while helping reinforce a collapsed patty wall, you nearly drop a stone on your foot. You move like a warrior. The foreman mutters, eyeing your stance. Old habit. Let it go. Rice doesn't care how you used to kill. You nod. Historians often overlook the samurai who became peasants not just in shame, but by necessity. When stipends disappeared and swords lost value, many warriors quietly folded into farm life. Not every exile ended in grand rebellion or monkhood. Some ended in compost and calluses. You wonder if this could be a life. Real work. Honest sweat. No need for honor when everything aches equally. Then one night a storm hits. Wind like a blade. Rain like punishment. The paddies flood. Walls collapse. Chickens vanish. That angry rooster flies away like an insult. Everyone scrambles. No, you find yourself shoulder deep in mud, helping rebuild a barrier with hands that once held a katana. You bark orders, not out of ego but instinct, and they listen. Even the foreman nods. Just once. By morning, the worst has passed. The fields are bruised, but still standing. So are you. A woman hands you a steaming bowl of miso. Her palms are as rough as yours. You saved the Western line, she says. I just helped. Same thing. You sit beneath a tree sipping broth and watching the clouds scatter like tired thoughts. You realize you haven't thought about your sword in days. Or maybe you've just been carrying it differently. In your spine. In your hands. In the way you plant your feet when the wind tries to knock you over. You stay another week. Fix fences. Haul stones. Learn how to make sake from a man with no teeth and too many opinions. Then, like always, you move on. Not because you're needed elsewhere, but because you're not needed here anymore. And that somehow feels like victory. You wander north until the fields fade into forests and the forests into hills dotted with stone lanterns and forgotten shrines. It's quiet out here. The kind of quiet that gets into your bones and rearranges things. You stop at a temple you don't recognize. The banners are unfamiliar deep blue with a barley emblem, and the monks wear robes dyed in tea leaves and soot. One watches you from the gate, eyes narrowed beneath thick brows. You looking for shelter? He asks. You nod. He opens the gate. You can work. You nod again. Then come on. The temple isn't peaceful in the way you expect. It's busier. No tranquil chanting or slow tea ceremonies. This place hums with activity. Not worship, but preparation. The monks are arming themselves. Wooden swords, staffs, short blades tucked into sleeves. You glance around confused. The monk who greeted you grunts, tossing you a broom. You're not here to fight. Not yet. You sweep. Again. Always sweeping. But this place feels different. They're training. Not just monks, but farmers, tradesmen, young boys with clenched jaws. All moving through crude kata drills in the courtyard. Sloppy. Eager. Desperate. You ask the old monk about it. Bandits, he says. Worse than bandits, really. Organized. Hired. Maybe even ex-samurai. You raise an eyebrow. He nods. Not all of us landed gently, you know. You're offered food and a mat, And in return you teach. Not formally. Not loudly. Just corrections during practice, soft adjustments to stances, better footwork. They listen. Because you move like someone who's been there. Because your silence carries weight. Soon you're asked to lead drills. Then to help design watch rotations. Then to fight. One evening, you spar with the head monk, an old wiry man with a bent knee and a mean streak. You're holding nothing but a staff. He's got a blade. Not real, but close. The bout lasts 6 minutes. You win. He laughs, coughs, and wheezes all at once. Told you, he says to no one in particular. Still sharp. Word spreads. You become the temple's unofficial instructor. You show them how to fight in groups, how to move as one, how to listen for footsteps in leaves, how to breathe when they're scared. Historians often overlook temple militias, but they existed. Semi-sanctioned, semi-secret groups of monks and laypeople who defended roads, protected shrines, or pushed back against corrupt lords. Some even say they preserved old samurai techniques longer than the clans who birthed them. One afternoon, a boy named Ren asks if he can call you sensei. You shake your head. Just call me the broom guy. He insists. It sticks. For a while things feel good, busy, meaningful. You still don't carry a sword. Not because you're afraid, not because you forgot, but because here a sword would turn you into something you're trying not to be. Instead, you fight with the staff. Long, blunt, humbling. It forces control, precision, mercy. It fits. One night word arrives. The bandits are close. Everyone stiffens. You feel it like wind before a storm. That electric panic, the surge of doubt. You stand in front of them, Ren, the old monk, the kid who trips during every drill, and you speak just once. You're not soldiers, you say. And you don't have to be. They blink, confused. You're protectors. That's different. Then you show them how to win without killing. Trip the legs, hit the ribs. Blind, but don't break. It's not glamorous, but it's possible. The raid comes 2 nights later. It's fast, messy, loud, but your students hold, and the bandits retreat. No one dies. You've seen blood in your life. You've caused it. But tonight, watching these villagers shout in triumph with bruises and pride instead of grief, you feel something sharper than steel. Relief. You stay long enough to heal a cracked rib and a strained wrist. Then one morning, you leave without a word. You don't want farewells. Just footprints. Just silence. You follow the winding river east until it splits into muddy fingers and disappears into the lowlands. The road here is uneven, pitted with roots and lazy puddles that never seem to dry. Your sandals stick slightly with every step like the land's trying to keep you. But you keep going, because the horizon still whispers with promise or at least habit. You arrive at a village you've never heard of, and immediately feel the tension in the air. Not the kind born from war or hunger. No, this is quieter. Calculated. The kind of tension that simmers behind false smiles and hurried glances. You hear the argument before you see it. 2 men, one in merchant robes, one in guard's gear, barking at each other outside a thatched roof tea shop. You're protecting the wrong side again, and you're paying the wrong man. The crowd watches without intervening. You don't, because you recognize the pattern. There's a power struggle here. A local land dispute. 2 families or maybe factions locked in a slow-motion tug-of-war over rice roads and bruised pride. Later at the inn, you overhear more rival storehouses, burned down carts, sabotaged accusations, whispered with sake-laced breath. Each side swears they're in the right. Each wants peace, but only after they win. You drink your broth quietly. The old innkeeper nods to you. We used to have a yojimbo here. A good one. Kept things balanced. And what happened to him? She sighs. Tried to stop a fight with words. Got a knife in the ribs for his poetry. You nod. Of course he did. Later that night, someone knocks on your door. A young man, clean robe, nervous posture. My father wishes to speak with you, he says. The father is a grain merchant, wealthy, worried, and surrounded by retainers with more silk than sense. He wants protection. Or rather, presence. A bodyguard with a spine and a story. You'll walk with me during negotiations, he says. Just look serious. You accept. The pay is decent, and frankly, the job seems less suicidal than farm work. The next day you stand behind him as he meets with his rival, an elderly woman, with sharp eyes and no patience. The meeting is theatrical. Each line barbed, every bow deeper than necessary. And your presence is clearly meant as an intimidation piece, a chessboard knight placed near the king for effect. You say nothing. You do nothing. But when the negotiations end, the old woman glances at you and says, "He's clever. Hired someone who won't talk." You nod slightly. She nods back. This continues for days. You're walked into tea shops, market, stalls, town halls. People speak around you, past you, but your shadow says more than words. They don't know what you'll do if someone lashes out and you don't correct their assumptions. Eventually, the rival faction tries to hire you too. You decline. Not because of loyalty, but because you're playing a longer game. You begin visiting both sides' storehouses at night. Not to sabotage, but to observe. You take notes. Who's overcharging, who's skimming grain, who's turning water rights into favors. You discover the problem isn't land or honor. It's greed and pride. As always, historians still argue whether Yojimbo like you actually served both sides in disputes, subtly steering them toward peace, or simply took coin from the highest bidder. In the old plays, the bodyguard always betrays someone. In real life, sometimes betrayal is just strategy with better timing. One evening, you meet with both faction leaders in the village square. You speak. Just once. Burning your neighbor's rice doesn't make your own grow faster. They blink. The silence feels heavy. You toss a scroll onto the ground. On it, ledgers, names, witnesses, all the rot that's been eating both houses from the inside. You both lose if this continues. They stare at the scroll, then at each other, then grudgingly nod. An agreement is reached, a shared grain tax, a neutral watchman. Neither side wins, but neither loses, which by some miracle feels like progress. You leave 2 days later. No parade, no extra coin. Just a nod from the old woman and a rice cake from the merchant's son. As you cross the bridge out of town, someone calls after you. What do we call someone who protects both sides? You don't turn around, but you answer. Balanced. The road welcomes you back. The next town you pass through is built on poetry. Not literally, of course, it's still mostly woodstone and the occasional leaky roof, but every wall has a verse painted on it. The inn signboard is a haiku about broth. The butcher's awning features a surprisingly moving couplet about pigs and transients. Even the outhouse has something scribbled above the door about impermanence and digestion. You smile. You haven't smiled at riding in a long time. You check into the inn and are handed a room key with a tiny scroll tied to it. The scroll reads, "Room with creaky floor. But if you sleep through your dreams, you won't notice it. Charming. Questionable in quality. But charming." That evening, you find yourself seated on the edge of a courtyard stage where local poets gather to recite under paper lanterns. A small crowd has assembled traders, farmers, and elderly women eating dried squid with theatrical intensity. The host, a round man with more teeth than syllables, invites you up. You wave him off. "Come now," he says. "Everyone carries at least one poem." You don't stand. But you speak. "I once saw a man fall on his sword," you begin. The crowd stills. He missed. The ground caught him instead. That's the whole poem. Silence. Then laughter. Then applause. You shrug. The next night you return. Not as a performer, just as a listener. But by the third night, you're part of the lineup. You start writing again. At first, it's fragments. Things you mutter while chopping wood or patching your sandal. Then full verses. You surprise yourself. They're not about war, or swords, or even disgrace. They're about soup that tastes like memory. About rivers that forget your name. About sandals that refuse to die no matter how much you walk. One poem written on the back of a miso receipt goes, "My sword is gone now. Still I slice the wind in half with quiet footsteps. Someone hangs it in the inn's entryway. You blush. A girl with ink-stained fingers approaches you after a reading. You have a good ear," she says. "I have too." She rolls her eyes. "You should submit your work to the capital. There's a new anthology collecting voices from the provinces." You laugh. "I'm not a poet." "Then why are people quoting you over their tea fair point?" Historians often skip over this part of samurai life, the quiet chapters, the drifting into art not as performance, but as survival. But there are references. Small ones. Scrolls written in old hands by men who used to command troops and now write about frogs and falling leaves. The sword and the brush were not strangers after all. One evening, someone asks you directly, "Were you ever real, like a real samurai?" You sip your tea. Once. They lean closer. Do you regret it? You don't answer. Not because you don't know, but because regret is slippery. And in this town, they write poems about that sort of thing. Regret's a blade too, it cuts slow and from the inside. Still, it shines nicely. By the end of the month, they've named you an honorary member of the Poetry Guild. The certificate is written in bad calligraphy and sealed with what smells like pickled plum paste. You keep it anyway. You leave without a goodbye. Only a poem pinned to the inn's door. I walked through your words. Some stuck, some fell off like leaves. That's enough for me. You disappear into the trees with a staff in your hand and verses in your sleeves. You are not what you were. But you're something else now. And that's worth writing down. The village smells like smoke before you even see it. Not the comforting kind, the curl of incense or firewood in winter. No, this is sharper, greedy, the smell of things burning that weren't meant to burn. Thatched roofs, dry rice stalks, cloth. By the time you crest the ridge, you see the damage, a cluster of homes blackened at the edges like someone took a torch to a sketch. People move like stunned ants, dragging buckets, herding goats, staring at ruined things with blank expressions. You pass a woman holding a broken rake. She looks at you with the empty focus of someone who's seen her tools reduced to ash and isn't quite sure whether she's next. You find the headman near the well. He's old, sweating, and trying very hard not to cry in front of strangers. "They hit us at night," he says. "We didn't stand a chance." They took rice, tools, even the bell from the shrine. Bandits, not exactly. He gestures toward the tree line. Used to be samurai. Of course, they did. They lost their swords too, he mutters, but not their need to be feared. You close your eyes. You've heard of these groups, scattered ex-samurai who didn't find temples or tea houses or poetry. Just bitterness. And fire. They'll come again, the headman says. You nod. Probably. The village has no militia, no weapons. The only bow in town is used to chase crows from the rice. A dozen men volunteer to stand guard anyway, clutching farming tools and thick sticks like talismans. You spend the afternoon teaching them how to hold their stances. It's basic, clumsy. Half of them have bad knees. The other half can't stop looking at your staff like it's magic. It's not. Just practiced. You build traps, barricades, you assign shifts and dig trenches. A teenager named Kyo insists on guarding the main road. He can't even lift his hoe without wobbling, but his face is set like carved granite. You let him stand there anyway. That night you sit by the fire with a small group of elders. One offers you sake that tastes like someone boiled vinegar with regret. You drink it anyway. You don't have to stay, one says. You've already done more than anyone else would. You shrug. I've seen this before. I don't want to see it again. She nods. You're not the first to come through here, but you're the first to stay when it got bad. Later, when the fire dies, you do what you always do. You practice, staff in hand, bare feet on packed earth. You move through forms in the dark. Not for show, not for memory, just for discipline. Because routine is a weapon too. You don't sleep. At dawn they come. 6 of them. Dirty armor. Real blades. Their leader wears the tattered remnants of a sash that once marked him as a retainer. Now it just looks like a lie. He steps forward and sneers. You call this a defense. You step between him and the villagers. He sees your staff and laughs. Another swordless monk. You smile. No monk. Then what you shift your feet. An old habit. The fight isn't long. But it is loud. They expected chaos. Fear. Maybe a few brave men with shovels. They weren't prepared for formation. For someone who moves like water and strikes like gravity. Your staff cracks ribs, arms, pride. You disable 3 of them before the rest scatter into the trees. You let them go. No death. Not today. Kyo is shaking when he lowers his stick. Did we win? You nod. Yes. Will they come back? Probably. But you'll be here. You pause. Then shake your head. You will. He doesn't understand. Not yet. But one day, he will. Historians rarely talk about these battles, the ones with no banners. No heroes. Just tired men standing up to other tired men. No records. No poems. Just scars. You help rebuild the rice storage the next day. You stay a little longer. Help bury what was lost. Help replant what can be saved. Then one morning before anyone else wakes you, leave a note on the door of the inn. Your hands are stronger than you think. And you walk. Again. You find yourself exiled not by law, but by circumstance. The island is small, rocky, windswept. A place where the gulls outnumber the people and the trees lean away from the sea like timid old men. You arrive by boat with nothing but a small pack, your staff, and a heart heavy with questions. The villagers, mostly fishermen, and their families, eye you like you've brought a storm with you. You're not wrong. Exile in feudal Japan was both punishment and mercy. Some samurai found themselves banished to islands left to wrestle with the sea and their regrets. Historians still debate whether exile was meant as a chance for redemption or a slow death sentence in isolation. Here you have neither choice nor ceremony. The days begin early. Fishing nets to mend, boats to repair, salt to harvest. You learn quickly that the sea is an unforgiving teacher, but one that rewards patience. Your hands once used to a sword's hilt now work knots and coarse rope. Your legs carry you over slippery rocks and sharp shells. At night, you sit alone beneath a sky thicker with stars than any city you've known. The ocean sings its endless song, a lullaby and a warning. You're haunted, not by ghosts but by memories. Faces blurred by time. Battles fought and lost. Swords you never drew. Sometimes a seal or dolphin surfaces nearby, curious. You watch them with quiet longing. You try to find peace in the rhythm of the waves. But the island is lonely. One day, a fisherman's daughter, Aya, approaches. She's young, strong-willed, not afraid of the exile who arrived like a shadow. She brings you food. She asks about your story. You tell her pieces, the parts you're ready to share. She listens without judgment. She teaches you how to fish with a spear, how to read the tides, how to recognize the birds that mean rain. You begin to feel less like a prisoner and more like a part of something, a small, stubborn piece of the island's life. The villagers start to accept you, slowly, cautiously. You teach Aya some of your moves with the staff. She laughs when she topples you. You laugh back. One night you dream of the mainland, of the sword you lost, of the battles you never fought. When you wake, the sea is calm. The stars are steady. And for a moment you feel whole. Exile hasn't erased you. It has reshaped you. And you, in turn, have reshaped it. The nights on the island are long and filled with whispers not from ghosts but from the wind. You sit by the fire watching the flames flicker like restless spirits. Each crackle sounds like a story begging to be told, a memory clawing its way from the shadows. You think about your comrades, the ones who fought beside you, who wielded blades with the same fierce honor, the same silent pain. Some died on the battlefield. Some disappeared into the mist of history. And some carry the same exile as you. You've learned that memory is a weapon and a wound. One evening, Aya brings a small bundle wrapped in cloth, a wooden carving simple but honest. A fox, she says, to guide you through the nights. You accept it with gratitude, feeling the rough edges against your palm like a tether to something living. The village elders speak quietly of the past tales of samurai who walked the island's shores, of battles long forgotten and of spirits that protect the land. You listen. You add your own quiet stories, careful not to overshadow. Historians still debate the influence of exiled samurai on local cultures, especially in isolated communities. Some argue these warriors preserved traditions. Others believe they faded into folklore, their true stories swallowed by waves and time. You wonder which you will become. Days stretch into weeks. You rise with the sun, work the nets, teach Aya and the children the basics of discipline and defense, not as soldiers, but as guardians of their home. The island teaches patience. It teaches resilience. And it teaches you that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with steel, but with silence and steadfastness. One dawn, as mist curls over the water, you walk to the highest cliff and look out at the endless sea. You feel the sword's absence less sharply now, not because you've forgotten, but because you've made peace. The waves whisper your name, and for the first time you answer. The story the villagers tell you is quiet, but persistent. They speak of a shadow that moves between the trees, sometimes a glimpse of a figure in old robes, sometimes a flash of a staff, always just out of reach. You listen without interrupting. These stories are the breath of memory passed from mouth to ear like sacred water. You realize you've become part of their legend. The silent guardian they call you, though you never asked for the title. At night, you hear the rustle of footsteps on moss, the distant howl of foxes, and sometimes laughter carried on the wind as laughter, or perhaps something older. You don't mind. You walk the island paths with calm purpose, teaching, learning, living. Historians debate the role of such figures, silent protectors who inhabit the borders between history and myth. Were they heroes? Outcasts? Spirits? The lines blur. For you, it doesn't matter. You found a place where swords are shadows and silence is strength. And that finally is enough. The night deepens around you, soft as a whispered secret. The breeze carries the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a night bird settling into rest. You lie beneath the canopy of stars, feeling the earth steady beneath your back, the steady breath of the world around you. The sword you once carried, the symbol of honor, fear, and purpose, rests now not in your hand, but in memory. It no longer defines you. You have walked many paths since losing it, the rigid discipline of the temple, the chaotic camaraderie of the stage, the humble toil of the fields, the silent watch of the village guard, and the lonely strength of exile. Each step has shaped you not as a warrior bound to a blade, but as a man shaped by resilience, compassion, and quiet courage. You've learned that honor is not just in the clash of steel or the glory of battle. It is found in the steady sweep of a broom, the whispered poems in a moonlit courtyard, the patient hands that till the earth, and the gentle strength to protect those who cannot fight. Your story is one of transformation, from sword to staff, from battle to peace, from exile to belonging. As the cherry blossoms drift softly to the ground and the seasons turn you rest, knowing that even without a sword, you carry a strength that no enemy can take, an unbreakable spirit, steady and enduring. So, breathe deeply, now. Let the sounds of this ancient land lull you into rest. The journey has been long, the road winding, but your story is complete for tonight. Sleep well, dear traveler. Tomorrow is another dawn. Good night.